Welcome to Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy, the podcast where insights and innovation meet. Every episode, we dive into conversations with industry leaders, experts, and change makers, bringing you the stories and ideas in the renewable energy sector that shape our world. And now, let's jump into today's episode with your host, Wes Ashworth. Welcome back to Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Bernard Brown, a true leader in the realm of sustainable innovation. With over 2 decades of experience bridging the public and private sectors, Bernard currently serves as Chief Operating Officer at Empire Diversified Energy, where he leads groundbreaking projects in waste-to-energy and resource efficiency. His passion for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and his technical expertise in project development make him a powerful force in the transition to a cleaner, more sustainable future. Bernard, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So let's start out, take us back to kind of the beginning. So what originally sparked your passion for energy? Was there a moment or project that made you realize like this is what you wanted to do, this was your calling?
Actually, yeah, it goes back to military service, believe it or not. I'm a veteran, and while I had the unique opportunity working with the California Army National Guard as a planner in emergency management and operations, and I learned the 3 pillars of national security were food, water, and energy. And the energy aspect in a disaster is one of the most critical functions that you're trying to restore right away, whether it's a hurricane, tornado, wildfire, it's the deployment of energy. And so that aha moment inspired me to go back to school and continue my lifelong learning. And that's where I took up education at Texas A&M University at the Energy Institute and realized that energy was the focus and the goal where I wanted to go.
Yeah, no, I love that. And we'll hit on several topics today. I want to kind of get into it. I think there's some really good content here to discuss. And something we touched on briefly was just you've spoken about the need to move from, renewable in quotes to sustainable. And there is an important distinction. So what do we risk, I guess, if we stick to renewable only narrative and help give us some insight on that?
Well, this comes down to policymakers and lawmakers and outside influencers in the energy sector. When you say the term renewable, they've put a definition on it. The most common definition is wind and solar. And that's fine, but hydro should be considered renewable, if not sustainable. And then waste to energy should also be considered a sustainable energy source because the human population continues to grow. The average person produces 4 pounds of trash a day. The current behavior is to bury said trash, and therefore that is not sustainable from a land standpoint. But the use of diverting that waste to a landfill is sustainable. So when you look at renewable energies, if we take away the possibility of the box definition of wind and solar, and we round it out to sustainable energy sources, you begin to have a broader, well-defined energy portfolio that can serve a community, a microgrid, or a larger region. As you know, the sun doesn't always shine. You get cloudy days. The wind is intermittent. So we want to look to maximize and capitalize those energy efficiencies and learn to optimize those energy needs and meet our current demands for energy. Because in addition to, again, the human population is rising. That's a fact. And the demand for energy is rising almost with it. And therefore, we have to have a pathway to cleaner energy. And we just have to have the right portfolio. So I think the term sustainable energy should become a broader, better sense of where we're going. Because that's, at the end of the day, I think that's what we should lead toward.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense. And another piece we hit on was just the reality of some energy trade-offs. So, you pointed out that every energy solution has trade-offs, from lithium mining for batteries to wind turbine disposal. How can the industry do a better job of educating people about those realities without alienating them?
It comes down to data points. And, the data you put in is the data you get out. So if you exclude data points, like what is the true cost and impact of lithium mining? What equipment are you using are you using EV batteries? Are you using diesel? Or are you using renewable natural gas? Or are you using biodiesel? But there is an impact to mining the lithium. There's also an impact of disposing the lithium batteries and the windmill blades. There's lubricants in the gensets for the wind turbines. And where do those lubricants come from? Are they from fossil fuels or are they from renewable sources or recycled sources is a better. So I think we have to just be honest in that level of discussion when we say, well, renewables is the way to go. Well, are we including the critical minerals and those things? And are we talking how we got there to those critical minerals? But yes, they do generate, and you shouldn't avoid the fact that you are generating, again, sustainable electricity or power source from that. But let's be honest with the whole picture, is what I'm trying to educate and opine on.
Yeah, sure. And how do you approach, I guess, the challenge of communicating some of those trade-offs to stakeholders who might prioritize short-term gains over that long-term impact?
Well, it comes down to how you do your project presentation. So as you're
Yeah.
developing the project, if you want to fully include a life cycle assessment, or you want to include that data point in your front end load engineering process, that's where that discussion needs to be had. From a policy standpoint, that's a whole different pathway, and that's where you have to educate lawmakers, local planning commissions, and the stakeholders involved that it's not always what you're being told. Let's tell the whole picture, that there
Yeah.
will be a disposal aspect, there will be a life cycle aspect to these projects.
Yeah, and I think the other side of that, in a world that's kind of clamoring for perfect solutions, and sometimes that can be a real deterrent from this renewable journey, sustainable journey. But what's the hardest truth about energy you wish more people understood?
Energy is complicated, and it is.
Yeah.
And there's no perfect solution. There's no perfect answer. But the reality is our demand for energy is increasing.
Mhm.
And so I think the hard truth is, what are you willing to sacrifice to have that energy portfolio or that solution? Are you willing to modify your behavior? Are you willing
Yeah.
to pay more? Are you willing to, what are those externalities and internalities are you willing to accept to have that energy portfolio you're seeking? Uh, I always, one of the things I bring forward is like, people demonize fossil fuels, and
Right.
there's trade off. But I ask people, do you have a family member who has diabetes? And they look at me funny, and they're like, why do you ask that? Because we able to provide not a cure but a solution, Lantis, through mass farming, and that's very energy intensive, that the farming aspect. So there's a trade-off.
Yeah.
Do you not want to do mass farming anymore? And then what energy source are you going to use to supplant that diesel or that fuel or the transportation, etc., that makes these problems kind of engineered?
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And I think that's the important part is you got to understand the full picture, understand some of those trade-offs, as you said, too. And then the reality that there is no real perfect solution, and it is a journey. It's not and I've said this before, but it's not an instant, like we can't get there overnight. It does take time. It does take, slow progress and incremental gains and things like that too. So thinking about that a little bit, maybe a little different flavor. So how do you balance optimism about new technologies with the realism of their challenges?
Coming from a pyrolysis and gasification standpoint, I mean, there's been a lot of challenges, as you brought up. And there's always technology challenges, but I think what we're looking at is right now we're so used to instant gratification, and we want
Right.
instant success, and it takes time to use transitional technology to get there. Not pointing fingers at nuclear reactors, but we've come a long way. And if you
Yeah.
look at the safety record of the U.S. Navy and the French is impressive, but they've got there because of their processes. They've doubled down on the technology, and so going to your question, it goes back to, you're going to have hiccups along the way in the technology. So there's a level of risk, and how do you de-risk that? And one aspect with these hydrogen hubs, the government has kind of come in as an equity partner by de-risking projects. And that's
Yeah.
that's that's how this is going to work. You have to have an equity partner who's willing to accept something a little bit higher risk, or has a better risk tolerance to move these projects and these portfolios forward.
Yeah, and kind of just to branch off on that and get into more into hydrogen for a moment. So for
Sure.
listeners maybe less familiar with hydrogen, I think everybody's heard it at this point. It's a topic that comes up a lot. I think people know very little about it when it comes down to it, I think sometimes. But can you explain why it's such a critical piece of the sustainable energy puzzle and why Empire's betting big on it?
So to say it's a critical piece, it is a piece.
Yeah.
Critical, I will defer on that word within there. It is an important
Okay.
piece. And the reason why I say it is because it's an industrial gas that's been around for a long time. It's
Right.
a $180 billion a year industry right now.
Yeah.
What we're doing is going back and looking, and there was failures in the hydrogen space. There was also
Sure.
wins. The West Sacramento Fuel Cell Initiative during the early mid 2000s was close. They were very in that those efforts kept going, but when the fossil fuel, when gas dips below a certain price, we double down back to gasoline. So,
Right.
but that technology keeps moving forward. And and going back to what you said, why is Empire doubling down? We found a very innovative and creative process in this hydrogen space. A part of our property in Fallsview, West Virginia, does sit on a salt seam that is lends itself to storage. But the first thing is you want to generate before you store it. So this is step
Uh-huh.
one, the generation of the hydrogen. The other thing is Empire operates the port of West Virginia, located along the Ohio River. There's several initiatives, the Clean Ports initiatives, and there's other areas where decarbonization of ports and transportation logistics. So we at Empire felt it was we got to put our money where our mouth is, and we can't be a mouthpiece. We have to, or a jawbone. We have to be a backbone in this space.
Yeah.
So looking at the hydrogen space and looking at the process, why not generate clean hydrogen at the Port of West Virginia and use that energy at the Port of West Virginia, meeting two goals. One, we're injecting clean hydrogen into the transportation energy space, and two, we're utilizing it in a manner that meets the goals and objectives of the federal government by decarbonizing a port.
Yeah. And looking at sort of the future of hydrogen and from your perspective, and I think some of these are pretty common, but what are those biggest barriers to scaling hydrogen production and adoption today?
Well, you're up against almost 120 years of infrastructure in the oil and gas industry, and that's one point. The other point is the oil and gas industry are known. They already know how to make hydrogen. They do it now at most refineries. So the challenge is the behavior shift and getting them on board coming into the hydrogen sector.
Yeah.
That's going to be the first step. We don't want to alienate anyone who has experience or the ability to generate that energy source. And so, one, we have to embrace them as a partner in the energy journey involving hydrogen. Two, it's again having early adopters and risk takers in shifting to a hydrogen fuel cell if that's what you want to go for transportation, if that's what you want to do for power. But it's again finding how does hydrogen fit into your energy portfolio.
Yeah. And with that sort of follow up to that, are there specific industries or use cases where you see hydrogen making the fastest impact right away?
Yes, microgrids, I
Mhm.
believe, would be one of the first for power generation. And then two, the trucking industry when it
Yeah.
comes to transporting long hauls. And again, EV, very good options for local, but when you're talking long haul trucking, and I'm not an expert, there's someone else I'll give her credit, Lynn Lyon. She's probably one of the most amazing women in the energy sector. I recommend you talking to her, but she educated us on why the use of EV batteries in the trucking industry because it limits that load that's set by the Department of Transportation because the weight of the battery.
Sure.
So if we can perfect hydrogen fuel cells, it still allows closer to a weight transfer or weight balance for shipping in the logistics side. And once you start getting those little pieces, it goes back to the combustion engine. You had the Model T, you had Ford, that engine was adopted in aircraft. So
Yeah.
as one progresses, hopefully the other progresses, and you'll have experts in those field who are able to take from one area and maximize, optimize, and become efficient. And that's where you start to get momentum in a casual shift and change in energy.
Yeah, and I'll shift a bit, just dig into something else with hydrogen. So you hear color coding a lot, and I know you've raised some concerns about the hydrogen color coding system. You hear green hydrogen and blue hydrogen and gray hydrogen, and I guess if you could design a better framework to evaluate hydrogen projects, what would that look like? What are some of your thoughts there?
Well, I go back to again $180 billion industry. There was no color code for industrial hydrogen in that industry, and then all of a sudden now a group of people decide there's a color code system. Well, what's the benefit of having this color code system?
Yeah,
It doesn't change the value of what that hydrogen is. The hydrogen is a potential energy source, and so does it matter if it's gray, blue, pink, or green? That to me is baffling.
Yeah.
What's important though is the use of the hydrogen. Now, if it came from natural gas, the CH4, that's the methane. That's it's a fossil fuel
Right.
essentially. If it comes from an RNG, okay, but it still comes from waste diversion. If it came from electrolysis, but what's important is the cost of getting there, not the color, the cost.
Yeah.
And as long as you're spending more money to get to that energy source, that is the problem. And that's the challenge with doing this. So where I'm going with this is if okay, let's call it green hydrogen. So it's probably more expensive to go through the electrolysis process.
Mhm.
Therefore, they attach a government subsidies to make it more appealing. What happens when that government subsidy goes away? Your cost of hydrogen is going to increase, and
Yeah.
therefore it's not a palatable energy source. So by putting these codes on it, all you're doing is really manipulating the price and cost of that hydrogen.
Yeah, makes sense. It's good. It's a good thought. The other thing I wanted to hit on and spend some time here because you shared a bold statement with me, and I want to dig into this and kind of double click it on a little bit. So, you described this like this current state as kind of this Rockefeller moment, which is a bold, very bold statement. Can you share why you believe we're on the verge of something transformative like that, and what lessons history teaches us?
Right, wrong, or indifferent. The Rockefellers, and it kind of goes back to your title of your thing, the Titans of Renewable Energy.
Yeah.
The Rockefeller, when the Standard Oil was going through its trials and tribulations, doubled down. He did not, even though he's broken apart. And again, I encourage your listeners to read the prize if they have not read the prize, because that journey is outlined.
Yeah.
And he had a waste product, the gasoline, and he turned that gasoline into a very powerful energy source that propelled the United States. And this is our Rockefeller moment with hydrogen because we have one of the most talented workforce in the world. We have some of the brightest and most intelligent people in the academic settings. You have the right team of people. And again, we have the right financial instruments and markets to do this. This
Yeah.
is our Rockefeller moment to bring all of those together to propel hydrogen as an energy source that becomes effective and useful in our transportation and power grids.
Yeah. And if this is a Rockefeller moment for hydrogen, what do you think the energy sector can learn from the oil boom era to avoid some of those pitfalls that we saw then?
Well, yeah, that's a very interesting question. I mean, the oil boom, again, we're talking over a hundred years or more, going back to
Yeah.
McDonald, Pennsylvania, when they discovered oil there. So the lessons learned is it cost a lot of money that they didn't get government subsidies back then, and
Right.
they took a lot of risk. And so we have to look at the oil and gas industry that the risk that they took in the initial beginning got us to where we are now. Whether you're talking about, and again, I don't want to talk about the greenhouse gas perspective, just talking about how we've evolved as a society.
Right.
And so we have to learn that you're going to have to be a risk taker. You've got to have an appetite for risk in order to make that change. It's a friend of mine once told me, you don't know if that parachute's going to open until you jump.
Yeah.
So we got to jump. We have to take steps. We can't sit on the sideline and watch it pass us by.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Thinking about that investment side. So what role do you see for private investors in realizing, I think, this transformative moment for hydrogen? What role and what opportunity do you feel like exists for them?
The banks and the financial, those sectors, and even family offices, private equity firms, they have a unique opportunity to come in and take and be early adopters or invest the money and and hedge and lower that risk. That's the big thing. The other thing is by them becoming advocates and them becoming involved, them becoming stakeholders, it starts to shift the perception and the view of how these projects are funded. And I go back to the federal government and the hydrogen hubs. There was a lot of discontention. There was some people who opposed it and felt it was not the best use. But what the federal government essentially did was said, we're willing to take a risk to help this sector move forward. So with that, private equity firm A, family office B, whatever, you should also follow suit, get on board, and help us finance these projects because you are a critical piece of the energy path forward. We need them. We need those. We need them to participate.
Absolutely, and a lot of them. So
Yes, yes.
any of them that are come in, we'll take them. Um, so switching up a little bit just to Empire's unique approach and Empire turning food waste and sludge into hydrogen with a negative carbon intensity score. Can you walk us through a little bit of how this works? What makes this process so groundbreaking?
Sure. Some of it is proprietary, but some of it's not.
Yeah.
But at the basic level, the process flow, we are diverting food waste, fats, oil, greases, dairy waste, other vegetable waste, bad meat, uh, things that would normally go into trash, be discarded. So there's the diversion. So that material that would normally find its way to a landfill or someplace else, you've now diverted those greenhouse gases.
Mhm.
Sludge that's normally land applied, that's no longer being land applied. So
Yeah.
even when sludge is land applied, you'll still have some volatile organic compounds coming off the back. You may have some PFAS, which is a very touchy topic. Here, we take that material, put it in a digester, and recover the methane that's produced by the decomposition. But and we'll get to the digestate, the PFAS. We've partnered with one of the best companies I know, Heartland Technologies, and we're using their gasifier to split the carbon and the hydrogen from the methane chain and recovering that carbon and using that hydrogen as an energy source. Then we're taking the digestate out of the and gasifying that also. Therefore, we're really reducing and limiting any material from going to a landfill or being. We're trying to maximize the value chain in the entire process.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. Is there any, I guess, challenge behind convincing communities and regulators to support those waste energy projects and given some of the stigma around waste management?
Yes, and part of the thing with the Hydrogen Hub is there are strong community benefits action plans that are required for
Yeah.
each project. So we do have to engage the community. We have to educate them and allow them to participate and be part of the process. And part of that, you're going to have common things like, well, what about the smell from the digester? What
Yeah.
about the emissions? And those are all valid and very important questions. And so we have to show them how we've engineered around that, whether our buildings under negative pressure to reduce smells and odors. We're using very detailed hazard process analysis, again, using some of the brightest and best engineers to make
Yeah.
sure that our process is safe and it's done efficiently and optimized. The big thing we have to educate them is you don't want gases leaking. That's one of the big things. Oh, well, you're going to be venting. Well, no, because we're venting, we're losing money. We're losing money. If gases are
Hmm.
escaping, that's revenue. I always show on a draw. That's a dollar signs leaving your project that you don't want to lose. So
Sure.
you want to
Yeah, yeah.
you want to be as efficient as possible. The other thing too is showing them that the benefits that we're trying to give them cleaner fuels for their community.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And I know, like you hit on several of those, probably the concerns that come up most commonly and questions that people ask. So I appreciate you touching on that. The other thing we talked a little bit about was just the importance of projects that can stand on their own economically, that are somewhat subsidy and independent or can stand on their own. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that does that influence your approach to financing and partnerships and everything else?
Sure. So I go back to my days as a developer. I had really great mentoring, and
Yeah.
Jeff Snyder was that mentor, and he taught me a project's got to stand on its own 2 feet. And then when I went to go work for Empire, I brought that mentality with me. And when we were trying to do the hydrogen project, there was a lot of discussion around the 45V tax credits and everything. So I had to show my board and the CEO that this project would stand on its own 2 feet, meaning in the absence that the federal subsidies go away, this project will survive and still be profitable and hit its levered return unlevered return rate.
Mhm.
So, and I've taken that philosophy through all my project development experience and project design. That how do you design a project, especially in the energy space, especially in the waste to energy space, that stands on its own 2 feet, and that's what you have to do. And so, what you here, you just have to find multiple revenue streams for that project. But here's the other thing
Yeah.
too: with waste to energy, you have to make sure that you're competing against landfill pricing. So, and not just addition the subsidy aspect, but It's always cheaper to put material in the ground. That's a behavior that you're fighting against. So the project not only has to be to stand on 17 feet, it has to withstand the behavior of the current action that's going on, which is landfilling. How do we compete against landfilling? So you design multiple revenue streams and maximizing every opportunity coming off that project design to generate revenue so it stands on its own 2 feet.
Yeah, I love that. Can you give any examples that you can share in terms of kind of like how that came to life and again thinking about some of those revenue streams and again just thinking about some of the challenges of designing a project that is subsidy independent and then how you've overcome it.
So number one, this was not done independently by myself. We had a fantastic team that came together. I like the term nimble, but I was told not to use nimble. That we're scrappy. Whatever you want to do. It was a team concept. You bring together smart people. You get them. You start putting ideas together, and you start hearing the collaboration come to life. You start
Yeah.
seeing the smart people in the room say, "Well, what about this? What about that?" And okay, you're going to have digestate from this project. Well, is there a way to capture revenue stream off the digestate? And
Hmm.
is there a way to capture revenue stream off the carbon as we separate the carbon and the hydrogen? And so when you have your team members and you allow them to free think, put ideas out there, and become productive, the project starts to come together. Then the other important is you've got to bring in like your CFO. You have to bring in those finance people because they're modeling your ideas as you move along. And so
Yeah.
you're kind of finding out, okay, what's going to work, what's not going to work, and then the project starts to come out. Or, as you know, Wes, sometimes the projects don't. But
Right.
here, it was a natural progression of, okay, how do we make money from the waste? How do we
Hmm.
make money from the digestate? How do we make money from the carbon? And here's the big one. The federal government gave a kind of a quasi mandate that they wanted $1 a kilogram. That's aggressive.
Yeah.
We got close. We got
Yeah.
close. We're one of the cheapest levelized cost of hydrogen in the United States, and there's a reason why they set that mandate. We're up against gasoline and what you pay at the pump. You
Yep.
don't want to pay that much money more for hydrogen if you have a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. So
Hmm.
the way you get there in a new, going back to you say the new process, new technology, because you have a lot of upfront costs that are going
Hmm.
to be higher than 100 years of known infrastructure in the gasoline industry. You have to be able to maximize revenue streams across the board to get close. And over time, just like the oil and gas industry, we're going to get better. Wes, it's going to
Yeah.
improve. And you may get there to $1 kg. It may you may get close.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of those breakthroughs come, right? They're really aggressive goals set, get really smart people in the room. You really encourage that sort of creativity and problem solving, and it's amazing you accomplish things that you didn't think you could in that environment. So yeah, I think a ton of wisdom shared there.
We call this our moonshot. We did because
Yeah,
a lot of people are like, "Well, who's Empire? How are you going to get in the hydrogen hub?" And I do appreciate again going back to risk. Our CEO Frank Rosso empowered me, and so did
yeah,
Bill Torto, our chairman of the board, and Scotty Weziak, our president. They all said, "Go do it.
hmm,
Take your moonshot," and then we
yeah.
won. And
Gotta love it.
it's been an incredible journey, and it comes back to the leadership of your organization trusting you and giving you that power, the empowerment to go do it,
Yeah.
to bring us to that level.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. Well, a transition a little bit. I want to touch on something else that we had mentioned in a previous conversation around just the four pillars: site control, permitting, financing, feedstock, offtake security that you mentioned as the critical pillars of a successful project. I guess which of those pillars tends to be the biggest bottleneck, and how does Empire overcome it? Just wanted to understand a little bit more about that topic.
One of the most critical, well, it depends who you're talking to. One day in a room they're going to say, well, your feedstock and your offtake are your critical because if you don't have the material and you don't have the offtake, then you don't have the project. And I agree, that's a true statement.
Yeah.
But in my world, in my vision, in my opinion, since you asked, I believe financing is the most critical. If you don't have the money to do the project, you're not going to get it done. And
Mhm.
when we proposed this idea in the state of West Virginia. They have been, the EDA, the Economic Development Authority, has been a great advocate for us. They have done the bond allocations for the projects. A lot of people think, oh, West Virginia oil and gas. No, there's a lot of wind in West Virginia. There's solar in West Virginia, and now there's hydrogen coming. And the
Yeah.
state has been a wonderful partner in making sure that we had bond allocations to do this project. So going in, the financing pathway is there. That way, it's not the bottleneck. We've de-risked that bottleneck. But now it goes back to, like you said, the feedstock and the offtake. The other thing, though, the other pillar is site control. If you don't have the site locked up, or you don't, where are you going to build your project? Can you even build
Yeah.
there? And then can you permit the project? But to me, financing is probably one of the most critical pillars. And you got to be
Yeah.
able to speak. You have to have a relationship with the banking people. You have to.
Mhm.
They are, again, a critical stakeholder in any project you do.
Yeah. And that segues into another topic we touched on, which was just the difference between project development, project management, some of those distinctions, some of that skill set that's different that you need there. Can you help us understand that a little bit better and give some insight?
I have a couple master's degrees, and one thing I've always looked at, and at A&M, I was grateful that I had to do a project management course. But I wasn't seeing in that course was, okay, I can manage the project. I understand the SWOT analysis and all those things, but how do you develop a project? And that
Yeah.
has come through experience and mentoring, by the way, people who have been kind enough to take me under their wing and impart their knowledge with me. So where I'm going with this is I think we as a collectively, as an industry, have to educate either formally or make sure that we're mentoring our people on how to develop these projects, because project development is a science. And I do believe
Mhm.
that. You'll hear some people say it's an art. Well, no, there's a pattern you have to follow, and there are
Sure.
details you have to know. You have to know how to locally permit something. You have to
Yeah.
understand what permits apply. You have to understand what cycle do you bring in the financing? What cycle do you start your basic engineering? And that is project development, not project management.
Without a doubt. Switching gears a little bit, just thinking about some of the future things. So, when you look 10 or even 20 years ahead, what does the energy landscape look like? What role will hydrogen, waste energy, and other technologies play from your perspective?
So my delusion of grandeur is that it's a robust, energy diverse, where that the solar panels on our roofs get better. They're fully integrated. The wind turbines are better maximized and become more efficient. Um, that nuclear energy has a home at some point because of the
Right.
mass populations. But in the hydrogen, my dream is the hydrogen fuel cells in the vehicles. I really, that's where that's where my passion is. We're seeing hydrogen go.
Yeah.
It's not that I displace oil and gas. It has its place for right now. But you said in the future, I'd like to see
Mhm.
a hydrogen fuel cell vehicles as the baseline. There's nothing wrong with EVs, but I don't want to wait 8 hours or 6 hours to charge my vehicle. I want to be able to charge up rather fastly and go. And that's all I think that's a good option.
Yeah. But the concern you hear is hydrogen's combustible and not safe. And
Yeah.
that always comes up, and it's funny. I find myself kind of like redirecting that all the time in conversations just with friends and people like that. So I'll let you talk about that. Go ahead and dispel
So
that.
I am not a hazard process analysis expert. Again, you have to get the team, but there are companies out there who have invested already a lot of money on storage, on transporting, on doing this, and I can't, and I might get corrected here. I can't. I have not to date learned of any vehicle fuel cells that have caught fire, and but again, it's probably happened. And this hasn't been reported, but I have not seen it. The fuel cells are getting better and better on the technology side. Ballard is probably one of the best known in the industry for their hydrogen fuel cells. There are buses running currently on their fuel cells.
Yeah.
There's companies like Chart Industries, Chicago Bridge and Iron. Those two companies have put their own money into their own designs to make sure that hydrogen is stored safely and transported safely. Jillian Ivanko has done a fantastic job at Chart Industries, leading them as a critical transporter of hydrogen. So to your point, there are dangers, but just like with nuclear and the Navy, they've done a fantastic job. So
Yeah.
allow those smart people to keep doing the job that they're doing, and we're going to get even better.
Yeah. The thing I always say, and maybe, I'm not an expert in this, but gasoline is combustible and dangerous. Like
It
we're
is.
used to dealing with gas on a regular basis in our normal lives that yes, there are inherent dangers, there are risks, but there are also, safety protocols in place and things in place where we can make it safe. So I think that can't be ignored either when you look at that comparison.
So, Wes, one thing you'll learn from me, that I don't bash other industries. Like,
Yeah.
I just won't because we need them. We need to
Yeah.
work together with them. And so, gasoline, while has some negatives, it has positives. And just like hydrogen has some negatives, it has positives. Wind, same. We all have to learn to work together and figure out how we fall within the portfolio. But you're going to have naysayers, like you said. You're going to have people
Yeah.
out there pointing out the flaws, and okay, nothing is 100%. There's always a potential for danger. But if
Right.
you allow the people who specialize, who've devoted their careers, their academic lives to figure those problems out and bring them into your team, you're going to get there.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well said. Thinking about some other things. So what are some areas of innovation that excite you the most right now? And are there any underappreciated technologies or approaches that we should pay more attention to?
I'm a thermal guy, so I like the gasification industry and pyrolysis. They're very underrated. They're often described as incinerators. They're not, but as they evolve, and they will, again, I believe that waste to energy, that's the path forward. No longer putting MSW in the ground.
Yeah.
I really would like to see gasifiers and other thermals get better and better and improve to the point where we're no longer landfilling.
Yeah, agreed. And then thinking also just about, not just technologies, but the future of talent and energy talent. So you've talked about the need for just hybrid skill sets and, engineers who can develop projects and then I'm a big advocate of that, of like attracting the best, brightest talent into the industry that we can. But how do we cultivate the next generation of leaders who can build the future of sustainable energy?
It's our youth, and it starts at at the education level. It starts at the middle school, high schools. Start teaching sustainability in that process,
Yeah.
and it's not just the energy people. You need the welders, you need the electricians, you need the people who are going to be driving the material, moving the logistics. And so
Yeah.
it comes from an integrated standpoint, and it's either through junior colleges, through four-year colleges, through on-the-job training, apprenticeships. I think the unions can play a major role in the energy transition by adopting sustainable practices and being part of that transition. And again, the four-year institutions and your graduate degrees being flexible in their degree programs and adopting sustainable engineering, sustainable design, things of those natures and pinpoints to help develop the future talent that's going to carry us forward when you and I are no longer here, Wes.
Yeah. And something you hit on earlier was just how powerful mentors have been in your life. Looking back in your career, what advice or wisdom for a mentor has stuck with you and maybe shaped your approach of your work today?
So there was a gentleman, I'm not going to name names, but he once told me I was trying to get into the private equity world. I wanted to be on the other side of the desk because
Yeah.
in this industry, you see the private equity, when you start closing projects and you're cutting checks and you're like, who are these people?
Yep.
Why are they making all this money? So I wanted to get in the private equity side. And he was a mentor of mine, but he said, you're not the guy. He told me that. He says, "You're not the guy," and
Interesting.
it motivated me to go back to school. It motivated
Yeah.
me to keep going back to school. And what he did inadvertently was make me a lifelong learner.
Yeah. That's good.
And by being a lifelong learner, it has allowed me the opportunity to continue to learn both from academics and people in your classrooms. Like the last degree I got was finally from Virginia Tech, and I'm very proud of that degree because I always wanted to be a Hokie. But when I was in class, I had people around me who were a lot younger, and they're looking and they're like, "Are you a professor?" I'm like, "Oh no, no, I'm just here to learn. I'm a
Yeah.
student. I just want to learn."
Sure.
And it's important to humble yourself and be able to step back and say, I want to learn from not only the academics, but like in grad school programs, you have people working their way through college again. And they have perspectives, they have industry knowledge that maybe you might not know about. And if you listen, they'll share it.
Yeah.
And
That is
so,
so good.
believe it or not, they become a mentor, they
Right.
become an educator. And so, listening is critical.
I agree completely. Just that curious mindset. And I think what's important too is just hearing from different perspectives as well. I mean, hearing all sides of the table, just listening, being open. You don't have to agree with it, but listen, be curious, ask questions. I mean, I think that is such a key to life and success. And I think what we need to propel our industry forward and get to where we want to go, I think it is going to take a lot of that mindset. So, and I love you shared that. As we get closer to time, I want to give a couple quick interesting questions. So, thinking about hydrogen or renewable energy, as a whole. So, what's the most common myth about hydrogen or renewable energy that you'd love to bust right now?
Well, I've heard it's a bomb. It's a bomb. It's going to explode.
Right.
Again, it's an industrial gas. It's cost. It's being used more than people realize. It's a $180 billion industry. Allow that industry to come into the energy space and become part of the portfolio. That hydrogen is safe and it can be used effectively in our energy mix.
Yeah. And maybe it's that, but if you could change one common belief about hydrogen or renewable energy just overnight right now, what would it be?
The politicalization of energy.
I agree.
That no one political party should own energy.
Yeah.
And that if I could change anything between renewable, sustainable, and hydrogen, is it should not be a tool used in politics. That energy is something that's critical to our daily lives. We have built our society around it, and it should not be used in political jockeying or lawmaking or fights. Energy should
Yeah.
be bipartisan, and it should be best for the community and as a whole.
I agree wholeheartedly. I didn't even prep you or anything on that question, but you just had that ready to go, and that was so good. I agree completely. Um, what's one thing listeners, whether they're policymakers, business leaders, or just energy enthusiasts, what's something that they can do to accelerate the transition to a sustainable energy future?
It, Believe it or not, your own behavior is a first step forward. So recycling your plastics,
Mhm.
recycling your aluminum, separating your food waste. Those are individual steps that don't have to be legislated. They don't have to be mandated. Those are steps we can take as individuals that when you start doing it in a collective front and start doing it, you start making a difference. You start making changes. So
Yeah.
that's number one. Number two, again, like you said, listen to all parties because there may be a little bit of diamond information in that statement. There may be some knowledge that you didn't know about that they're going to all of a sudden give you the aha or give you that information you need to move your projects forward. Listen. And the other thing is be open to innovative changes when it comes to energy. We can't be closed minded. Don't demonize other people's ideas when they're trying to move energy forward. It,
Yeah. Yeah, so well said. And final point, final question. So what's next for Empire Diversified Energy, and how can our audience follow and support your journey?
well, next is hopefully future developments. Full disclosure, Empire is being merged with a company called Vivicor. So
Mhm.
that is the next step.
Yeah.
Vivicor is a midstream company based out of Dallas, Texas. They are acquiring Empire Diversified Energy. So you can follow our journeys. Like I tell people, follow our journey. You can follow us on LinkedIn, our website, and you'll see that hopefully Empire will start to deploy additional projects to help divert food waste and create renewable, sustainable energies for our country.
Yeah, perfect. And I'll add some of those links in the show notes as well too for those out there that
Thank
want to
you.
check them out. So that wraps up another insightful episode of Green Giants. A huge thank you to Bernard for sharing your expertise and vision for a more sustainable energy future. This is definitely a fun conversation. So your work and beyond is just a testament to what's possible when innovation meets purpose. If you're as inspired as we are, be sure to check out Empire's work, connect with Bernard to stay updated on their groundbreaking projects. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to Green Giants wherever you listen to your podcasts for more conversations with the changemakers driving the clean energy revolution. And if you enjoyed this episode, leave us a review. It helps others discover the show, share it with your network, spread the word about the incredible innovations shaping the future of our planet. And we will see you next time.
This episode of Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy, was brought to you by Lee Group Search. If you enjoyed today's discussion and are looking to recruit top talent for your company, or find your next career opportunity in the renewable energy sector, visit leadgroupsearch.com. Let's continue driving the future of clean energy together. Until next time, keep pushing toward a greener future.